Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. Since the 1870s, the historic Amador Hotel has stood on the corner of Amador and Water Street, watching the city of Las Cruces grow from a sleepy western outpost to the second largest city in New Mexico. Over time, the Amador Hotel has weathered many changes and challenges, including the possibility of it being knocked down in favor of parking space. Today, the Amador Hotel is breathing new life with the help of Heather Pollard, who is president, and Deb Dennis, who is vice president of the Amador Hotel Foundation, Incorporated. They are our guests on today's Fronteras, A Changing America, discussing the past and future of the Amador Hotel. And when you think of the Amador Hotel, you really have to go back to the 1800s, to the 1870s to be exact, and talk about Martin Amador and Refugio Amador. And let's start with them.
All right. Well, they were a pioneering family here in Las Cruces. Martin Amador actually arrived with his mother as a young boy in 1851 and was in the area for some time. He came back after the Civil War, married with his first child, and established a home here of his own. And he built the Amador Hotel. He was quite the businessman. And had a number of different endeavors going on. One of the primary businesses, though, was freighting. He freighted from St. Louis to Silver City, where he had a mercantile store, as well as mercantile stores here in Las Cruces. And he freighted from Chihuahua up to Santa Fe on the Camino Real. But he built the Amador Hotel in approximately 1877. And it had a number of lives to it. One of the earliest photos we have, though, is only from about the 1890s, this one. And we know the time period because it has a second floor. The building started as a one-story adobe building, and he remodeled it in order for it to be used as the first Doña Ana County courthouse, post office, and jail after Las Cruces became the Doña Ana County seat. Mesilla had served that function for some 30 years until 1880. And the Amadors lived actually directly across the street in what is known as the Casa de Jardín, the garden house, because it was so beautiful. Refugio was known for her green thumb, and she got seed catalogs from all over and had all kinds of flowers, and Martin planted all kinds of fruit trees for her and whatnot, and it was a really very beautiful home.
And that's what Water Street is today.
That's where Water Street is. And there's a reason why it's called Water Street.
There's a reason why it's called Water Street, and you can see in the photo where the Acequia Madre ran. You can see the water, and that's what's Water Street today, because the Acequia Madre ran right through there. But let's show you a photo of the family, actually. And this is from about 1898, and Martin and Refugio are sitting in the center. On one side of them is their son Juan, and on the other is Amelia. And standing above them are Clotilde, from left to right, is Clotilde, Maria, Frank, and Corina. And I'd like to point out Corina because she inherits the hotel from her mother, actually from her parents. Martin died in 1903, and all the property was left to Refugio as his wife. And then when she died in 1907, the property was left to the children. And Corina, who was the youngest child, inherited the hotel. In this particular photo, she's about 14 years old.
How big was Las Cruces at this time? population-wise?
Well, at the time of their of coming back in 1861, it was very small. We're talking a population of about 500-600 people.
And do you know what brought him to Las Cruces, or what made him decide that Las Cruces was the future of southern New Mexico?
Well, for one thing, I mean, his family was here. His mother came in 1851, and he had worked in the area as a young boy from a very early age. He had worked at Fort Fillmore. He had a contract with the Army to provide the hay for all of the horses and mules and whatnot. He had contracts, and so he was working out at the foot of the Oregons. He had teamsters out there. He worked in a silver mine. He was the paymaster. So he had had a number of jobs. But he really was a visionary in a sense, in that he was never afraid to embrace change. Many of us don't like change. He could see change coming, and he made the most of it. Where he really left a mark and changed Las Cruces forever was in the role he played in getting the train to come into Las Cruces.
Let's talk about that, because at the time, Las Cruces was literally second fiddle to Mesilla.
It was. Mesilla was the political, cultural powerhouse of the valley. Everything that was happening in Mesilla. It had the population, it had the church, was very strong, but politically it was the center, and it was the Doña Ana County seat. But the Atchison Topeka Railroad was wanting to build a spur from El Paso to Mesilla. And so they were negotiating with the men of Mesilla to purchase land for right-of-way and a train depot. The Mesilla citizens felt as though their land was more valuable. They didn't like the price that the railroad was willing to pay, and so
in other
there
words,
was
nothing
dickering.
has changed for Mesilla.
So there was dickering going on and bargaining. Well, it didn't take Martin very long to see what was happening, and he grabbed his good friend Jacinto Armijo, and they went to the railroad. They didn't wait. They just went to the railroad and said, "We will donate and just give you 100 acres of land for right-of-way if you would come to Las Cruces instead of Mesilla." And then what they did was they organized 5 other businessmen in town who donated the land for the depot. So the railroad could come to Las Cruces at no cost to them, and they said sure. So in April of 1881, the train arrived at the depot in Las Cruces and forever changed the history between the two communities, and it's one reason why Las Cruces today is the second largest city.
One of the interesting things about Corina, who inherited the hotel, was she married the night manager was
Frank Campbell.
Frank Campbell, and he was quite the marketer and the wheeler dealer. And that in that period of time, it was a bit of a scandal because she was Hispanic, he was Anglo. Was he divorced?
He had been married.
He had been married before.
and had children.
I would imagine that would be quite a scandal at the time.
At the time. He was not Catholic, but for some reason the marriage worked. They really clicked together as business people. And I always think, and others think, that that is an interesting anecdote, that really the effectiveness and the success of the hotel was because Corina found a man that really was quite the marketer.
Let's talk about Corina, because this is very unusual for the time. She inherited the hotel, not the eldest son.
Exactly, and this is one of the things about the Amador family that really makes them exceptional. They're exceptional for a variety of reasons, but again, they were very forward-thinking, and in a day and age where the eldest son always inherited the property, this was not true for this particular family. And I think one of the reasons may have been that Martin himself came from poverty. He never inherited, even though he was an eldest son, he never inherited property. His mother married 3 times, but each time her husband had other children. And so when each husband died, the property went to other children and not to Martin. So he basically started at ground zero and had to build his own assets and wealth and so forth. And he felt strongly that all of his children should inherit.
Martin Amador was quite the entrepreneur and had the
He
connections with the other families, the Armijos here in Las Cruces, to really, as you say, be visionaries and to look down the road to see the potential that the city had over Mesilla. And as you say, the rest is history.
He was very community minded. They were huge supporters of education through the Catholic Church, in particular Loreto Academy. They supported Loreto not only financially, but he had many farms and provided a great deal of produce and fed people. And so they were very generous in their giving back to the community.
I really,
let's talk about the heyday of the Amador.
I identify with that because I'm a collector, and probably my house looks almost as cluttered or maybe more cluttered than. But Mrs. Amador, Senora Amador, was a collector, and the hotel lobby looked like a museum, and it was a melange.
And they were quite travelers. They were world travelers.
They were. Carina traveled the world over, and in fact, in the university archives today are all types of postcards and letters that she wrote while she traveled. And she collected all sorts of things. I mean, and I love this photo. This photo is from around the 1912. And part of, I mean, you can see, I mean, Nubian figures and Bengal tiger rugs and whatnot. But what I love about this particular photo is that you can see many of these objects and artifacts in Citizens Bank today. Because when Citizens Bank purchased the building, the hotel, from the Amador Campbell family, Jim Eichert, as president of the bank, bought about half the collection of everything in there to use as decoration for the bank.
There's a neat little story about the Nubian slaves. A very senior lady called me one day, and I went out to interview her, and she'd been married to one of the scientists with the Manhattan Project. And so he asked her to bring the children down for a couple of weeks, and they spent 2 weeks at the Amador Hotel. And the children were very small, probably kinder, elementary, and they were so afraid of the Nubian slaves, they would circle around them, and occasionally they'd touch one and then they'd run. So I think that's a real good human
So
interest.
from the late 1870s through, what changes did the hotel see? It added a second floor.
Well, it saw a number of changes because at the time that Martin and Refugio owned the hotel and operated it, it really wasn't a hotel as much as it was a boarding house. And in particular, from the 1880s from 1880 through 83, it served as the Doña Ana County courthouse, post office, and jail. But by then, the first permanent courthouse was completed, and so it no longer functioned that way. And what they did was they turned it into Amador's Entertainment Hall. And they had a stage on the north end where there's a staircase today. But they brought in all kinds of actors, opera singers from New York. And so there were a variety of theatrical performances. They had puppet shows for children. They had Saturday night bailes. And in particular, the Rio Grande Republican reported that by the mid-1880s, so 85, 86, the biggest fad in Las Cruces was roller skating on Amador's beautiful wood floors. And this was
actual roller skating.
Actual roller skating. This was a thing to do in Las Cruces. So they had men and women in there roller skating. in Amador's entertainment hall. And it remained an entertainment hall into the 1890s, as well as a boarding house. It didn't really switch over to being a hotel until after Karina had married Frank, and they embarked on this vision of turning it into the finest hotel in the valley.
Well, let's talk, you know, the history's so rich. And I've been to the Amador Hotel myself on several occasions, and I've held events there, and it's beautiful. And you know, the idea that at one point it was being considered to be torn down, to me, is just unimaginable, because it's undergone so many changes. In 1972, it was sold to the bank, and then between 1983 and 2006, it served as the Doña Ana County offices. What's being done right now to preserve the hotel itself and bring it back to life and to have it be a museum, Heather?
Well, we've been very, very fortunate. The city, then Councilor Dolores Archuleta, convinced the city and the county that the building really needed to be owned by the city, because the county had basically left the building and it was standing there and there were no bidders. So the city bought the bank, bought the hotel for $1. And
For $1?
For $1, yes. And that was because of the anti-donation clause. So a big group of people, including the Historical Society and Deb Dennis, who was on the original board, all banded together and were advocating for the building to be restored. And the building is on the state historic registry. So in fact, nobody could have demolished it, but it would have been benign neglect. It would have just crumbled, you know, without.
During the process of building the new Doña Ana County offices, part of what was being pushed was them saying that the building was so deteriorated that they needed new offices. So as a result, people were talking about how it was uninhabitable.
Well, and that wasn't true. The county, you know, could have said what they said, but they had no basis for making those kinds of remarks. And we brought in Pat Taylor and Cornerstones, who were two of the foremost groups, or Pat's group and then Cornerstones. And they said the building had great bones, it was not deteriorating, and the building doesn't have a foundation. So, you know, the fact that it was sinking into the ground is baseless, you know. So our argument was that it is the southern gateway to Main Street, and at that time I was very involved in getting Main Street pushed through. But the Amador was not on what the city calls the ICIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. So we did manage to get it on the ICIP, and City Council all along has been very, very supportive. But it wasn't until Robert Garza came up with a brilliant idea and brought a young and enthusiastic developer to the property. So the Amador basically is going to receive capital outlay money and TID money. The TID money is invested money from downtown. And so about $1 million is going to be spent on the restoration of the Amador, and the developer, Max Bauer, he's charged with demolishing the bank drive-through and the part that Mr. Eichert added. Because if we want to get it on the National Historic Registry, we've got to get those portions that are non-historic off of the building.
And that was added through the bank, where they added the safe and a conference room, correct?
Right.
And so what is being done today, you know, with your group to find some of the original works of art and furniture to bring it back? I mean, what kind of outreach are you working on?
Well, people have been very generous, and some of the pieces we have are original to the Amador, but some of them are, each room is staged, and some of the pieces have been donated, one by a board member, Pam Creek, who passed away, and she donated all of her furniture. So the furniture is evocative of that era, and so it looks like a museum. Now we've got the furniture in, and people just call and say, I have such and such, I have an armoire, I have this or that. And so we accept anything. The latest was a huge grand piano that had been shipped out west. But the real exciting plan for the Amador right now, it's not too exciting because they're shoring up the columns, because the columns are floating. The columns that are holding up the second floor and the roof, some of them are floating off the ground. So Senator Papin has brought us, and Representative Steinborn have brought capital outlay money, and that's imminent. And then there's asbestos in the building. Again, Senator Papin has brought capital outlay money, and Representative Steinborn to remediate the asbestos. But the exciting part for downtown and for economic development and for Main Street is Max Bowers is planning a martini bar, a full-service high-end restaurant, a bakery and lunch counter, and what else?
Brewery, pub.
A brew pub. So the Amador will, and on that piece of property, they're calling it Visit Las Cruces now. It used to be the Convention and Visitors Bureau. They will have a new home that will be built on that parcel of land. So we are sitting right in the middle of all of this exciting economic development for Main Street.
In addition to capital outlay money, you're also looking for private donations and for people that want to get involved to participate in this, correct?
And we've raised, we're very proud of ourselves actually, we've raised over $500,000.
$500,000.
And so we
In
always,
private.
in private donations. So when we appear in front of City Council asking for support, we always emphasize that we have done this and we are continuing to do so. Each room can be subscribed at $10,000. And how many rooms do
We have
down?
8 of 9 rooms subscribed.
Really?
Which
Up
is
to this
why
point.
we've been able to do the work in those specific rooms.
So who's coming forward to participate and keep this dream alive?
It's interesting. It's not wealthy families. It's people who truly love historic preservation. It's we have 2 families that are pioneer families in Las Cruces who have memories of the Amadors, the Amador Hotel. One family, they lived there. And so people just, one gentleman who's married to a lady who's lived here all of her life came forward and did this for his wife. The Altschul family, Jan Altschul, her mother was a pioneer, and her grandmother. And so it's not wealthy people that just have all the money in the world. It's people who really, really care. It's from the heart.
And, you know, how can people get involved? You know, where do they go? Who should they talk to? I know you have a website, AmadorFoundation.org. How can people get involved to keep this dream going? Because there's still a lot of work to do.
There is a lot of work to do. Well, they can call 525-1235. I take all calls. And some people, we've been doing tours. And so just give us a call if you'd like to donate, if you'd like to purchase a room, if you'd like just to make a donation of whatever amount of money. One of the things I wanted to talk about, that I had a call the other day, and I think they're going to be filming in the Amador. We have a ghost, and Deb and I
I was going to bring up the ghost,
we
but
did not believe in ghosts.
We have more than one.
I know there is more than one.
And well, I'll tell this story, and then Deb can tell about the music. we believe there's a little girl involved because there was a soft toy that we found in one room. The toy moved, and the toy moved again. And then there was a second soft little plush toy. And we were up to about 8 of those toys. And I took them over to Tutti Bambini, to Sister Beth's little store, thinking she could sell them. And we haven't seen any more toys, but we're not sure if the child has just been resting or she's sulking because we took away her toys, but we're ready for another visitation from her. She seems like a happy person, a happy little girl. She wants her toys back. Maybe we should put a toy.
I think you should put a toy or do something.
Maybe a baby
And
doll.
I think it just adds to the richness of all the spirits that have gone through the Amador Hotel over the years, that, you know, these voices that have gone through this hotel are really
Well,
want to hear.
one of the groups actually who has provided support to the foundation is El Paso Ghost Tours. And they had approached us a number of years ago, the owner had, saying that, you know, they did tours in Mesilla and whatnot. But they did a study and they found all these ghosts. And so they've been doing monthly tours.
AmadorFoundation.org is a great place to learn more about the Amador Hotel and its future. Heather and Deb, thank you very much for coming in to Fronteras, A Changing America. Thank you for joining us this week on Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. We'll see you next week.